Rams house. Welcome into a brand new episode of the Rams Report by Chat Sports. Today, we are breaking down Dane Brugler's The Beast in the leaked draft intel that comes our way from it on some of the top Rams draft prospects at the 13th overall pick at the wide receiver position. We're going to talk about what Dane Brugler had to say, one of the NFL's top scouts, one of the NFL's top draft insiders overall. This guy really knows what he's talking about when it comes to the NFL draft, when it comes to these prospects, both in terms of the background info and on the info on the field. And those two things can be just as important with any given prospect, whether that background is medical or character-wise. So we're going to get into all that intel today. But before we do, I got to be honest with you, Dane Brugler's The Beast is not free to access. This thing is behind a paywall from the New York Times, and I get why companies do that. I totally do. But I don't think it's fair that you guys should have to pay for Rams draft news or Rams draft content. As loyal Rams fans, subscribers of this channel, you need this information. And so we here on the Rams Report, we bring it to you for free. 100% free coverage all year round. You will never, I promise, I swear, you will never be charged a dime for Rams news or Rams draft content on this channel. So hit that sub button, stay up to date on everything you need, and do it for free. But before we get into Dane's information, here's my updated board so we can kind of see how it compares to how Dane's ranking out the receivers for the Rams. So obviously, my top option at 13 is Carnell Tate. We've talked about this before, but we've also talked about how the odds of Carnell Tate being there for the Rams are just not super high at the end of the day, because I truly think there's just unfortunately too many teams in front of you that might want to grab a receiving option, a weapon for their offense, and Tate will likely go at the latest 11th to the Miami Dolphins. After that Jalen Waddle trade, going to be hard for them to pass. Makai Lemon feels very realistic, though. I think there's a solid chance he's available for you at 13. Definitely a chance he goes earlier if some team's in love with him, but it feels really solid, like a 50-50 coin flip there. Kenyon Sadiq and the rest of these guys, they all feel like much, much higher percentage options. And there's one name on this, or that's not on my updated board, that is in Dane Brugler's top 5 receivers that we'll be getting to later in today's show. And he's another option that I absolutely love for the Rams, someone we haven't talked about as much on this channel. So stay tuned for some info on him. But let's jump straight into Brugler's receiver rankings with number 1, Carnell Tate. He and I are aligned on the best receiver in the class of 2026. And let's just say, guys, Dane Brugler is a very big Carnell Tate fan. When you're reading through the intel on each of these players, and if you do have access to the Beast, you know what I'm talking about. There's a reason they call it the Beast. It's beastly with its scouting reports on these guys. But the rundown for Carnell Tate, who we've already talked about a lot on this channel in many other videos. If you want more information on him, go check him out. But ideal size, great hands on this dude. He's a natural hands catcher. Very infrequently needs to use his body to catch the football, outside of on some very rare deep ball occasions where he does get into some body catching stuff. He's a super physical blocker. I feel like you see him get into that situation as well. Shiftiness after the catch is an asset for him as well. And overall, just a really, really good receiver. Very, very ideal frame from him. Feels like a natural boundary product for you. Natural heir to Davante Adams is what I've described him as in the past. Someone who comes in and presents a lot of the same value that Davante has in the last season for Matthew Stafford. That red zone threat that he can go to over and over again in those situations. Here's Dane Brugler's quote on Carnell Tate. He said, "Tate is a long, technically proficient receiver who can win at all 3 levels using high-level tracking, adjustment skills, and catch radius. He projects as an immediate NFL starting Z receiver with Pro Bowl upside." And if you're not familiar with the concept of a starting Z receiver or that letter basis, what he means by that is boundary receiver, an outside guy like we saw Davante Adams used in this season. Moving on to his number 2 receiver, and one of my favorite options for the Rams, someone we have talked about maybe more than anybody, any draft prospect on this channel, I think, Makai Lemon, the USC receiver. If you guys know me, I absolutely love Lemon. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but from Brugler's perspective, great routes on this dude. He's unbelievable after the catch. I think that's one of his best value offerings for you or for any team is what he can do with the ball in his hands. And as a human being, he describes him as hyper competitive. He says a scout in the area says he's the most competitive guy in his area or one of the most competitive guys in his area and describes him as competitive almost to a fault. Just so much drive to be better than the people around him in every aspect. Limited athlete, though, at the end of the day, you see that in the 40 time. You see that in some of the pro day workouts. His speed is not going to be the way he wins. It's with all the things we just talked about. His route kit, his release ability, his ability after the catch, his competitive nature, his drive and desire to be the best is the way he's going to win. Smaller guy at the end of the day. He's not even 6 feet tall, does struggle with press coverage a little bit. He can release on you, but if you get your hands on him, it can slow him down a little bit more than you might like to see. Here is his summary of Makai Lemon. He said, Lemon doesn't wow with his size or athletic profile, but he is a smooth, manipulative route runner and catches everything thrown his way. Similar in ways to fellow former Trojans receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown, he already plays like a pro and projects as an NFL starter in the Z or the slot. I think he's a true slot at the NFL level. Very hard for me to see him being a super successful outside receiver, but he definitely feels like the most realistic option for the Rams, especially if you are someone who is okay with the idea of moving Puka back to a full-time Z role, letting Makai Lemon be your full-time slot, your primary slot. My goodness, this offense is going to be impossible to stop. And it just feels like something that is very much within grasp for the Rams. Like he will be there at 13. Whereas Carnell Tate, you just don't know that that's going to be the case. It feels very much unlikely. His third-ranked receiver, Jordyn Tyson, out of Arizona State. Another guy we've talked about a lot. Tyson, someone who splits draft evaluators. There are some people who have this guy as the number 1 receiver in the class. There are some people who have him as the number 5 or 6 receiver in the class. Brugler likes him. He praised his toughness. Obviously complimented his hands. I think that's one of the best things with Jordyn Tyson is just his ability to catch through traffic, his ability to be competitive for the football at the catch point. He praised his route tree. Talked about the way he can set things up against defenders, the stems, the cuts that he has, and his ability to win in that way. But of course, he also had to talk about the injury red flags. That's the number one thing that comes up for Jordyn Tyson. Why evaluators are so divided on the Arizona State receiver is the number of injuries he suffered throughout his career. He also mentioned fumbling issues, something I haven't seen people talk about quite as much, but it is absolutely true. 3 fumbles for Jordyn Tyson in his final 17 games of his college career, and then just an overall lack of functional strength, which is a little interesting or maybe inconsistent to some of you given the combine bench press numbers. But if you haven't already watched his bench press video, I encourage you to do so because in my humble opinion, I think he should have been disqualified. Those were not legal bench reps. But here was Dane Brugler's write-up on Jordyn Tyson. He said Tyson's injury history is concerning, but on the field, he is a sleek, twitched-up athlete who can create his own separation and win outside his frame at the catch point. He projects as an NFL starter, inside or outside, with a skill set that reminds me of Stephon Diggs. So high praise in the comp, but again, right back to the injury history. Just the very fact that injury concerns with this guy have to be the first words out of your mouth when you're doing a write-up on him. When you're talking about, like, in summary, here's the gist with him at the end of the day, is he's dealt with a lot of injuries. Is he's really struggled with those kinds of issues. The torn ACL, MCL, and PCL being the most concerning by far. Just a destructive knee injury, and one that can create repeated knee injuries. If you're not familiar with these kind of ligament tears in your knee, once you get them once, you're unfortunately more likely to have them occur to you again. Moving on to number 4 on Dane Brugler's receiver rankings, a receiver I think is underrated. His initial buzz was more second round, but lately you've been starting to see that first round buzz fire up around KC Concepcion, and I think it's very much deserved. He's Brugler's number 4 ranked receiver, and my goodness, is this guy dangerous after the catch. I think that's the headliner thing with KC Concepcion, at least from my perspective. From Brugler's, he really highlights the excellent release kit that he has, the way he wins in that regard, his special teams value, 88-yard punt return touchdown this past season for him. Praised for his work ethic by Coach Mike Elko at Texas A&M. Someone Mike Elko praised repeatedly for his ability to both support his teammates and his ability and drive to be the best coming into Texas A&M from NC State after a tough year where injuries were a major factor. Drop issues have to be a headliner with him as well, unfortunately, when you talk about the negatives with KC Concepcion. He had 7 drops in 2025, and they've been a consistent issue for him throughout his career. Smaller size. Not a huge guy at the end of the day. He's less than 6 feet tall, in that same size range as Makai Lemon, but he's even less rocked up than Makai Lemon is. You see Makai Lemon is a little bit more sturdy with his frame. KC Concepcion, a little bit more of a slim guy. And he's also dealing with a bit of a knee issue. He had a scope done on his knee by world-renowned, might I add, orthoscopic surgeon Dan Cooper, actually right here where the Chat Sports offices are in the Dallas area. So that's something else to continue to monitor with KC Concepcion, but teams, of course, have those individual medical write-ups on him, and that could be something that does worry the Rams, but not something that I really think is the biggest issue around his knee. But again, that's not something we have full access to information on, and honestly something I was not too aware of before reading this write-up from Dane Brugler, which again, if you don't have access to this, if you want more Rams draft content, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because we're going to be doing more content around Dane Brugler's The Beast. We're going to be talking about linebacker prospects in round 2 later this week, and we've got a 7-round mock draft coming out this Friday. So don't miss either of those videos by hitting the subscribe button and turning on your notifications, and lock in with the Rams Report. The draft is 2 weeks away, guys. Do not miss a moment. And when you get onto Friday's mock draft, leave a comment that says Noti Gang if you subscribe with notifications on and you got that notification, and I will give you a shout out in our next video. But let's move on, talk a little bit more about KC Concepcion. Here's what Dane Brugler had on his write-up on him. Concepcion must cut down on the drops and fine-tune areas of his game, but he is a versatile playmaker with an innate feel for getting open before the catch and creating after it. He has the receiving talent to become a starting slot or Z receiver while also providing value as a punt returner. And I think that punt returner value is important and significant for this Rams team as well. Almost as significant as the drop issues. Of course, you worry about those. And yes, like I told you guys, 7 drops in 2025 on 100 targets is concerning. A 7% drop rate, and you've seen that drop rate be high all 4 years of his college career, which, again, it's a consistent issue with him. It's something you're going to need to coach out. But how much of an issue, on the contrary, was special teams for this team? And he, and I think Makai Lemon as well, both feel like immediate fixes for that, because they could step in and be your day 1 punt returner. Lastly, the 5th-ranked receiver for Dane Brugler in the 2026 NFL Draft is Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. And this is the guy that I was talking about at the beginning of the video when we went through my board. Obviously, the only member of Dane Brugler's top 4 or 5 receivers, that did not make my top 5 board at the 13th overall pick. I swapped him out for Kenyon Sadiq, who is a tight end. But honestly, I don't have an issue with Omar Cooper Jr. if that was the pick either. He and KC Concepcion are very similarly ranked to me on the board, or Jordyn Tyson really more similarly ranked. Those 3 guys all in a very tight cluster. But Omar Cooper Jr. has been described as Daniel Jeremiah as the Ramsiest receiver in the entire draft. And that's something he keeps going back to. I know I've brought it up multiple times, but he has as well. He's clearly seeing the natural scheme fit that Omar Cooper could be in the Rams offense. And a huge part of that is his ability as a blocker. He's got a rocked up frame. This guy is built at his size at 6'1". Great hands as well. Very natural hands catcher. And his ability after the catch is better than I think he gets credit for. He consistently makes people miss. Ranked 4th in the FBS last season among all receivers in terms of missed tackles forced. But he does need some refining in terms of his route tree. And ankle injuries were an issue for him over the last 2 seasons, dealing with a high ankle sprain and a regular, just low ankle sprain, I guess it would have been. Here is Dane Brugler's write-up on Omar Cooper Jr. saying, Cooper will be an attractive draft target for the NFL teams that put high value on ball skills and run after the catch ability. He projects as an inside-outside receiver who can be weaponized when featured. And again, I think that on ball skills and after the catch ability are the two areas that he really fills for the Rams. We've talked about missing an after the catch receiver in this offense outside of Puka Nacua for the last couple seasons. I think that's absolutely true. Jordan Whittington doesn't offer a ton of that value for you. Muttfield so far has not offered a ton of that value for you. Devontae Adams certainly is not offering after the catch value for you at this point in his career. I think it's a great thing about a number of these guys, but especially Omar Cooper Jr.'s ability to come in day one and be that kind of threat with the ball in his hands. Someone that Sean McVay can get creative with, can scheme for and around to just get the ball in his hands and let him go to work. Someone that can take some attention off of Puka and of Devontae in red zone situations, even if he doesn't offer you that same value as a guy like Carnell Tate would in terms of one day replacing Devontae's role as the go up and get it guy in the red zone. He can still help you in those play calling moments. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Rams Report by Chat Sports. I hope you enjoyed this rundown of all of the top receiver targets in this year's draft. We're going to do one for linebackers as well, but if there's another position you guys want me to run through, something else you think the Rams should be looking at, let me know in the comments, and we could do an entire video just like this one on that position group with some of the top targets there as well. You guys let me know. As always, let's go Rams, and we'll see you in the next one.